Hello and welcome to the Marley Bird YouTube channel, brought to you by Red Heart Yarns. In this video, I'm going to show you how to work with some really great new yarn on the market called Irresistible. And we're going to talk about the yarn and how to maintain control of the size 50, yes, US size 50 knitting needles. So this is going to be a quick introductory video, but I will show you how to make this really great hip cowl. This pattern is free over on redheart.com. You can find a link to it right down there in the video notes. And while you're down there, go ahead and smash that like button because I know you're going to love today's video and you can just get that right out of the way. Along with the pattern, you're going to need a couple of materials. Let me show you what those would be. You will need one ball of Red Heart Boutique Irresistible yarn. Now this yarn comes in a 29-yard ball of yarn, which might not sound like a lot of yarn, but because of the thickness of this yarn, you really get a lot of bang for your buck and a lot of mileage out of your stitches. One ball will actually create that wonderful cowl. Along with this yarn, you will need a pair of US size 50 knitting needles. Now that's 25 millimeter, those of you elsewhere around the world. Last but not least, I would like you to get a finishing needle. Now these plastic finishing needles are fantastic and they're by Susan Bates, and it will really help you to weave in your ends and seam up your cowl together. Let's go ahead, grab your pattern and your materials, and I'm going to get you started on this wonderful cowl and talk to you about how to use this yarn. Let's take a look at the yarn first. First of all, you can see this yarn comes in a nice big ball of yarn. You can take off the ball band if you choose and unwind the yarn from the outside, or go ahead and reach right into the center of the ball and pull out the center pull, which I like to call the yarn guts. Once you pull out the center pull, you will look for the end of the yarn, which I have right here, and you'll be able to start working from there. Now this yarn is a really lightly spun acrylic and wool roving. Now if you're allergic to wool, don't let this fool you too much. It's only 10% wool, 90% acrylic, which makes it great because it's not going to pill nearly as much as that 100% wool roving will. So when you're using this yarn, it will have a lot of strength. See how there's a lot of strength? And that's because of the amount of yarn that's in here, plus because of the acrylic. But you'll notice it's essentially just a 2-ply yarn. See how it comes apart, which is 2 plies? And those 2 plies are spun together. So as you're working with this, you want to make sure that you are working into the full circle of yarn and not just into one of the plies, okay? Now I found that as I was working with this, doing the knitted cast on was really convenient. So I'm going to show you how to do that first. To do a knitted cast on, simply place the tail of your yarn in the palm of your hand. Take your working yarn, wrap it around your forefinger and your middle finger. When you come back up, cross over. After you've crossed over, turn your hand over. Now it's as easy as going under this first loop and grabbing the loop behind and pulling up, and you have a slip knot. Now right here, I want to caution you, this particular length of yarn, I don't think it's long enough. I like to have a little bit more length of yarn to be able to weave in later. So I will undo my slip knot, and I'm going to give myself just a little bit longer tail. And I'm going to do the same action. All right, personal preference, there we go. Once I get my slip knot ready to go, I will grab my needles, place the slip knot on the needle that will be in my left hand, take the right hand needle and do a knit stitch. So we will go into that stitch, take your working yarn, wrap it around the right hand needle, just like that. See how it's around the right hand needle? Come out that stitch, but instead of letting this stitch on the left hand needle jump off, we're going to extend this stitch, extend it, and let our left hand needle swivel around to place that stitch onto the left hand needle. You see how that works? Let me do that again. So that would be one stitch. Now the swivel is very important because it puts a twist on the bottom of the stitch you just created, and it makes a really nice line at the bottom of your work. Take your needle, go into the stitch, take your yarn over the right hand needle, bring that yarn through the stitch, extend the right hand needle, that gives me some slack, swivel the left hand needle, and scoop that stitch right on there. Now you will be tempted to pull on this yarn to tighten up this stitch. I'm going to encourage you not to do that because it makes it easier to go into the stitch yet again if it's not super tight. Plus, as you begin working your actual knit stitches, you'll be grateful that you didn't make them really tight. Extend, swivel, place it directly onto my needle. You see that? Now you'll notice with these needles right here, they are really thick, which is great because we have this really thick yarn. And you'll notice that the length isn't super long, but sometimes to maintain control of the needle, you'll need to rest the needle bottom onto the table or your lap. I've seen it actually even shoved between, this sounds funny, shoved between your legs so your legs are holding it so that you can have something steady to control the needle. Whatever works for you to maintain control of these needles. They seem a little bit fiddly at first because they're just bigger than what you're used to working with. But if you use the bottom part on the table or your lap or whatever it may be, you'll find that you get a little bit more grip. For the Irresistibly Hip Cowl, the pattern calls for 4 stitches. So we only need to cast on those 4 stitches, which is fantastic. Remember, your slip stitch does count as a stitch. Once you do that, it's time to jump into the pattern stitch, which is just knitting. The whole cowl is just knitting. You're really letting the yarn do all of the work and be as pretty and big and luscious as it wants to be. So let me show you how to work into these knitted cast on stitches with a knit stitch. It's really quite simple. You'll go into the stitch just as normal, yarn over your right hand needle, pop out, only this time we will let our left hand needle stitch, the one we went into, go off the needle just like a normal knit. So now we have 1 stitch on our right hand needle and we will do it again. In, around, out, off. In, around, out, off. In, around, out, off. Once you get to the end, what I like to do is I will pull down my work just a little bit, and then I will put the right hand needle now into my left hand so it becomes a left hand needle, and I'm ready to go on to the next row. Now those of you who have never done garter stitch before, I do want to point out when you turn your work, you will be looking at purl bumps because the backside of a knit is a purl. The biggest thing you want to be careful of is that when you go to work into this stitch, you don't accidentally go into the purl bump. And you also want to make sure that you are not pulling this yarn up to try and tighten that last stitch, because look what it does. It extends that purl bump up and it gives the illusion of having an extra stitch. So then all of a sudden you'll have 5 stitches and you'll just be like, what just happened? I didn't remember increasing. So just remember, you want your yarn down here, and when you pull your work down, you will see 4 purl bumps and you'll be ready to knit. To do that, you simply go into the stitch just like before, and you will knit down this row. Once you finish knitting this row, all you need to do is continue on in this manner. So you will knit every single row until your cowl measures 35 inches from the cast on edge. Once it reaches 35 inches, we will use our tail that we will cut nice and long to seam up our cast on edge to our bind off edge. So let me get to that point and then I will show you how to do a bind off and then how to seam it together. Wow, that didn't take very long at all. I finished this cowl in about 20 minutes. I actually did a Facebook Live post as I was knitting it, so you can confirm that. All right, so I am to the last bit of my yarn. Let's take a look. You can see down here, I just have this last bit of yarn and it's time to do a bind off. So I'm going to show you how to do that. We will knit 2 stitches to start off. So just like we've been doing all along, we'll knit 2 stitches. Then what we want to do is have this back stitch jump up and over this front stitch. And to do that, you can take your left hand needle, go into that stitch. See how I'm grabbing it? And just making it go up and over that front stitch and then off. So what has happened here is, as things fall out on me, this stitch right here, this is the one that jumped, and now it is like around the throat of this stitch. So it is bound off. So we have 1 stitch left on our right hand needle. It's time to knit another stitch. And we will do that yet again. So we have 2 stitches on our right hand needle. Have the back stitch jump up and over the front stitch and off. Knit 1 more stitch, back stitch, jump up and over the front stitch and off. Right here, if I had a lot of yarn that I didn't want to have extra, I could go ahead and snip it and just pull it through. But I'm to the bitter end, right? I don't need to cut. So I can just pull this last loop. I'm just pulling it, right? So it's cut right there. Give it a nice pull, and look at that. My cowl is finished off. What needs to happen now is I will take this nice long end, this nice long tail that I have here, and I'm going to use it to seam together this bound off edge to my cast on edge. First thing I need to do is decide which side is going to be my front side. So I'm just going to flip it over and we're going to call it good right there. And you can see here, as the edges are put together, that you get these loops down here. You have the little loops on each stitch, and they coincide with a loop over here on the bind off edge. So it's really not that difficult to take our finishing needle here, and I will thread the yarn through my finishing needle. See why this needle is so great? I just widen it and there it is, it's threaded through. And I'm not usually a big fan of plastic needles, but this one has a really sharp point and it makes threading this really super easy. And all I will do is I will pop over here and I'm going to go straight through the stitch. I'm going to do my best not to split the yarn as I'm seaming. So I'm going to go through the stitch. I think I grabbed some of the yarn. It'll be all right. All right. And I have a choice here. I can either come back through this loop right here and find the corresponding loop over here, or I can cross over and come back sort of like a whip stitch like this. So let's see what this looks like if I do this. So I just pulled through and I'm going to do that again. Rather than crossing over like I mentioned before and doing it like so, I am just going to find the two loops that coincide. You can see right there where my finger is. I'm going to have the needle go right in the same direction my finger was and pull through. Let's do that down here. Let's see if that's going to be my last loops. These are my next ones right here. Put my finger through there. This makes it really easy to see. Pop that through. There we are. And this will be my last loop. And of course, because I didn't put my finger through, I split the yarn. It's not what I want when I'm seaming. There we are. All right, so my cowl is seamed together. Now this isn't good enough to just leave right there as is. I will come back and I'm gonna do a figure 8. So if I went through that way, I'm gonna come back through and pop up this direction over here and come through and pop up this direction over here. Just to have that ending part nice and secure. I will do that same thing down here with my beginning tail. This is the tail I started off with my slip knot. But in the meantime, we have to deal with this to weave in our ends, correct? So at this point in time, I'm going to go ahead and snip this a little bit closer because I don't need all that tail woven in. And I can get rid of that. And what I like to do when I weave in the yarn, this particular yarn, I will decide which side I want to be my right side. So I think I'm going to have this be my wrong side. And the reason is, if I flip this around, see how the join right there is invisible and I still get my garter stitch bump? So I like that to be my right side. So knowing that means I need to tuck my ends in on the wrong side. So I'm flipping it back inside out. And when I'm dealing with my tails, with this yarn, you could leave it as is and thread it all with both strands, like both of the parts that are woven directly into your needle and start weaving in that way. Or if you wanted to, you could separate these strands like so. Okay, so we're separating them and we're going to weave each one in individually. What that does is it makes a less bulky join where you've woven in items. So you have a choice to make. You can either unravel and weave in both of these or do one like this. So let's check out and see what we like about both of them. So I have this one, they're both in there, and I think I'm gonna go along the same path as the join just to kind of see if it looks good. And I'm gonna make sure that I'm not going through to the opposite side, to my right side. You'll see my hand is right there. I am literally, now follow along with this, I'm splitting my strands, not splitting my yarn. So you know how each one of these, like the yarn has two strands. So I'm splitting my strand. And the reason I'm doing that is so that it doesn't show on the opposite side. And the reason I'm doing that rather than splitting the yarn is because I'm working with two big strands right here. If I were to split the yarn and try and pull through two big strands, it just isn't very pretty. So for this, if I'm going to use both strands still spun together, I'm actually splitting the strands of the yarn that's already worked, and I'm pulling my strand, my tail, through there. You see that? And I would keep going. I would still keep tucking this in some more, okay? So I'm going to leave that there. Let's address these ones. So these are separated apart, which makes them a little bit less bulky, which is great. But with these, because they're less bulky, I could actually split the yarn itself and have some traction. So here's what I like to do when I do it like this. I will go into the yarn and I will just start pulling through, and you'll see here, watch this, watch. Ooh, see how that just pulls apart just like that? The reason that is because it's not spun. Remember when I said it's lightly spun, and the way they're pulled together, you want to make sure you don't pull too tight when you use this method, okay? So I'm going to put this back on, just pulling it a little bit close, and then I'm going to pop through again. And you'll see here, it's not that I'm just going through the strands for this. I'm literally going through the actual fiber. And this nice sharp point of this needle really helps with that. Now, as I go that direction, I find it really important that I come back the opposite direction, and I'm going to work my needle directly into the fibers of the yarn I've already woven in. The reason I do that is because of the very same reason you saw this happen. I want this yarn to work back on itself so that it's harder to pull it apart. So when I come back the opposite direction, not only am I going into the strands that are already worked, but I am literally going through the yarn that I just wove in also. Okay, when I pull it through, it will have a really nice, look at that, a nice tight woven in, and that's not going to come undone. So I could go ahead and snip that one and be done there. But we still have another tail here, remember? So we've got to deal with this one also. Put that on your needle, and I will encourage you not to go in the same direction that you did the previous one, because that's going to get nice and bulky, right? So I am going to go ahead and start working this down into this direction. Let's go down here and see what we can make this look like if we go this way. Now, I know some of you are going to ask, okay, Marley, which way is your preferred method? I actually kind of like a combination of both. So if it's something big and bulky like this, where a cowl, and I have a nice seam where it doesn't matter if it's really big, then I will more often than not seam using both of them. But then when I get down to this point where I left this one, I will unwind it at that point and then weave in. So let me show you that. This is where I left off the other one, and so I've undone those. Now I will put both of these on my needle, one at a time, obviously, and then thread them in very similar to how I did that one. And I will find a place where I'm making sure I'm not going through to the opposite side, but I also don't want it to be uber super bulky, right? So I'm just kind of weaving it in a little bit. And this one I'm going to go down, and then I will do this because I left those a little bit too short. Caution, leave them a little bit longer. And I'm going to undo the needle, pop it through. Now I'll thread my needle because it's already popped through. See if I can get this. Oh, these needles are great. They're so sharp, and being able to do all this. All right, so I put that back into my needle, and now I should, in theory, be able to pull that through. Oh, there we are. It's nice and secure. It's tucked in on itself, and I should have no problems. I'm going to leave that be because that's going to be on the inside, and I'll do the same with this one. All right, my tails are woven in. My cowl is complete. From start to finish, maybe about 35, 40 minutes. Super fast, right? And let's see what it looks like on. Please forgive me if it messes up the sound a little bit. Oh my gosh, how cute is that? Let me see here. How cute is that? Oh, this is adorable. Oh, and it's super warm, and it's just soft against my neck. It's not too heavy. It's not too heavy, and it feels good. I bet if I wanted to, I could extend it a little bit and twist and make it doubled. Let's see. Oh yeah, that's adorable. That'll look great with my winter coat, don't you think? Sweet. All right, let's take it off. There we go. How's my hair? All right. Now you know how to make the irresistibly hip cowl designed by the Red Heart design team, because they really wanted to show off how well this yarn works up and how to use up those needles, and I think they did a really spectacular job. The color I used today is called Berry. Go out, get yourself some of this irresistible yarn. One skein will make this really super cowl, and you're gonna love it. It's so much fun. Make sure you hit subscribe and smash that like button, as my kids say, so you're up to date whenever there's a new video released right here on the Marley Bird YouTube channel. I hope you've enjoyed today's video and you'll come back for more. I'll talk to you guys later, okay? I'm Marley Bird, proud spokesperson for Red Heart Yarns. Bye. Let's put on my cowl. Woo! It's so cute! Ah! Looking for more Marley Bird? Don't worry, I've got you covered. Click right down there and you will find more videos just like this teaching you how to knit or crochet, all brought to you by Red Heart Yarns. Go ahead, click away. Don't be shy. Don't forget to smash that like button.